Namaskar. The first official visit to India post-COVID took place today with the Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen arriving in India. So India and Denmark, they last year elevated their relationship to a strategic green partnership. We'll be dwelling on the importance of setting and meeting ambitious green goals in the run-up to COP26, which is at the end of this month. We'll also analyze the rise of Asia in the post-pandemic world and India's key role in it. Let's begin with the headlines. My name is Mark Lin. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his Danish counterpart Mette Frederiksen take India-Denmark's green strategic partnership forward. The Danish Prime Minister hails Prime Minister Modi's leadership on the environment front as an inspiration for the world, describes her visit as a milestone for bilateral ties. This is the first in-person head of government visit since the COVID pandemic. Four MOUs exchanged between India and Denmark, including on mapping of groundwater resources and aquifers. 3 commercial agreements also inked, including one for development of hydrogen electrolyzers to fuel green energy. Prime Minister Narendra Modi invites Danish companies to make in India for the world. After a week of tensions with the island sparking international concern, the Chinese President Xi Jinping bats for a peaceful reunification with Taiwan. In response, Taiwan says its future lay in the hands of its people. According to sources, the 13th round of the Corps commander-level talks between India and China over the standoff in eastern Ladakh to be held on the Chinese side of the Chushul-Moldo border, personal meeting point on Sunday. Lebanon in darkness as electricity grid shuts down the country's 2 largest power stations. The shutdown is because of a fuel shortage. The nation is already facing a severe economic crisis. Russia's single-day COVID death toll hits a record high 968. Coronavirus-related deaths reported in a single day. The cases also continue to surge. Civil Aviation Minister Jyotiraditya Scindia inaugurates Greenfield Sindhudurg Airport under the Udan Scheme and flags off the first flight connecting Sindhudurg with Mumbai. Prime Minister describes it as a special day for the Konkan region and says it will give an impetus to connectivity and tourism. Facebook apologizes to its customers for the second major Instagram outage in a week, says that the issue has been fixed and things should be normal soon. Our top story. The Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen is on a 3-day visit to India, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the visiting dignitary held bilateral talks. The 2 countries inked 4 agreements and they also agreed to expand cooperation. 3 commercial agreements were also inked. So Denmark is a member of the International Solar Alliance and will coordinate in water and smart water resource management as well as efficient supply chain sectors. Let's look at this report.
कोरोना महामारी की शुरुआत से पहले यह हैदराबाद हाउस नियमित रूप से हेड्स ऑफ गवर्नमेंट और हेड्स ऑफ स्टेट के स्वागत का साक्षी रहा है। पिछले 18-20 महीनों से यह सिलसिला थमा हुआ था। मुझे प्रसन्नता है कि आज एक नए सिलसिले की शुरुआत डेनमार्क के प्रधानमंत्री की यात्रा से हो रही है।
The first head of state visiting India since COVID-19 restrictions. Ties that impact the future of not just India and Denmark but also the world. From green energy to water management and renewable energy, a lot was on the table. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen's first visit to India saw the two leaders hold fruitful talks with a focus on expanding cooperation in a range of key areas such as health, agriculture, climate change. Both sides reviewed the progress made under the India-Denmark Green Strategic Partnership and deliberated on further expansion of overall cooperation in multiple sectors.
यह पार्टनरशिप एक उदाहरण है कि किस प्रकार सामूहिक प्रयास के द्वारा टेक्नोलॉजी के माध्यम से पर्यावरण को संरक्षित रख सकते हुए ग्रीन ग्रोथ के लिए काम किया जा सकता है। आने वाले समय में क्लाइमेट चेंज के विषय पर सहयोग बढ़ाने के लिए अपनी प्रतिबद्धता को भी दोहराया। भारत की प्रगति के लिए जो हमारा विजन है, जिस स्केल और स्पीड से हम आगे बढ़ना चाहते हैं, उसमें डेनिश एक्सपर्टाइज और डेनिश टेक्नोलॉजी बहुत महत्वपूर्ण भूमिका अदा कर सकते हैं।
Danish Prime Minister hailed the cooperation between India and Denmark as a great example of how green growth and green transition go hand in hand.
I'm also proud that Danish solutions play a key role when it comes to your very ambitious targets, and I think you are an inspiration for the rest of the world. You have set some very ambitious targets when it comes to clean water for over 1 million households and for renewable energy, including offshore wind.
The two sides also inked 4 agreements that will provide for deepening of cooperation in areas of science and technology, climate change and skill development. MOU on mapping of groundwater resources and aquifers was signed, agreement on traditional knowledge digital library access. Commercial agreements were also signed. MOU between Reliance Industries and Sindhudurg Fuel Technologies on the development of the hydrogen electrolyzer and the subsequent manufacturing and deployment of the hydrogen electrolyzer in India. MOU between INFOSYS and AARHUS in UST to establish a center of excellence for sustainability solutions based in Denmark. MOU between the Observer Research Foundation and State of Green on strategic cooperation to promote knowledge sharing on solutions and facilitate research on the green transition of the economy. PM Modi said that both sides decided to cooperate in areas like efficient supply chain, smart water, resources management and technologies relating to the farm sector to increase the agricultural productivity in India.
स्वास्थ्य के क्षेत्र में हमने एक नई पार्टनरशिप की शुरुआत की है। भारत में एग्रीकल्चर प्रोडक्टिविटी और किसानों की आय बढ़ाने के लिए कृषि संबंधित टेक्नोलॉजी में भी हमने सहयोग करने का निर्णय लिया है। इसके अंतर्गत फूड सेफ्टी, कोल्ड चेन, फूड प्रोसेसिंग, फर्टिलाइजर्स, फिशरीज, एक्वाकल्चर आदि अनेक क्षेत्रों की टेक्नोलॉजीज पर काम किया जाएगा।
Earlier in the day, PM Modi welcomed Frederiksen to India at a ceremony in the Rashtrapati Bhavan.
We consider India as a very close partner to Denmark, and therefore I see this visit as a milestone for our bilateral contacts and for our cooperation. What we see is a very ambitious Indian government who really wants to take a great responsibility when it comes to the green transition in India and in the world. And I am very glad that we are able to have a cooperation about the green transition.
A visit that marks a milestone in ties between India and Denmark comes as a precursor to tough negotiations at COP26, with climate change dominating global discourse. India and Denmark have strong trade and investment ties. More than 200 Danish companies are present in India, and over 60 Indian companies have a presence in Denmark. There exists strong collaboration in the fields of renewable energy, clean technologies, water and waste management, agriculture and animal husbandry, science and technology, digitization including ICT, smart cities and shipping. Arun Sharma's report for DD India.
So let's take a look at the green strategic partnership that the two countries have with each other. Well, we know that both countries have ambitious goals within the climate agenda, and we talk about India's goals. Well, India has that 450 gigawatt target, which is to be a 400 gigawatt target for renewable energy, and we also know that in fact, India has already reached 100 gigawatts, and there is going to be another 50 gigawatts, which is already in the pipeline. Now, Denmark has about a 70% carbon emissions reduction target by 2030 as well. So 70% they're going to reduce their carbon emissions. But Denmark, of course, also wants to be an international leader in SDG 7. And what is SDG 7? SDG 7 is where one country gives to the other countries. It's ensuring access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, modern energy for all. A very laudable, motive as far as Denmark is concerned. India and Denmark, they are to demonstrate that they can meet ambitious goals, and that is possible if you actually follow a good path. We know that both have set, as we said earlier, very high targets, and they are meeting them. They are on target to meet those targets. In September 2020, the two prime ministers had agreed to elevate the relations to a green strategic partnership, putting the focus largely on climate change initiatives to mitigate climate change and to get us into a better world, moving us into a new normal with regard to cleaner technologies. Now, the part of that is there was already a joint commission for cooperation between India and Denmark, which was further strengthened to add all the green initiatives and the green goals. Also, it is a win-win arrangement because it's going to advance cooperations across all kinds of sectors, not only the green initiatives, but various other sectors as well. And there is special focus on the green growth and in creating jobs, because that is going to be the future when the youngsters also can now move in that direction, where they are looking at a different kind of world in which renewable energy, greener technologies, a greener way of life, a sustainable way of life is the way forward. So that is basically the crux of this relationship, and it's an important statement that the two countries are making before the COP26, which is at the end of this month. So that brings us to In Focus tonight, and In Focus we are going to be discussing the India-Denmark relationship, which is a green strategic partnership. And the guests on this program are Mohan Kumar, is a former senior diplomat and the chairman of RIS, Research and Information Systems for Developing Countries, and AK Saxena is a senior director at TERI. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being with us. Ambassador Mohan Kumar, so since 2020, we've called this a green strategic partnership. And what would you think? It's a statement of purpose, isn't it, on the environment?
Oh, absolutely. And thank you very much for having me, Mark. I would describe Denmark as a green superpower. There are very few countries which have a track record like that and which can really deserve a label like that. But certainly, if there is one country I would describe as a green superpower, that would be Denmark. I think this green strategic partnership, which was virtually concluded September 2020, had three objectives. One, to provide green growth and green jobs, particularly in India. Second, to help us accomplish and achieve the Paris climate change accords as quickly as possible and as well as possible and as ambitiously as possible. And third, obviously, the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goal. I see that in your opening remarks, you mentioned SDG 7, and Denmark is well on its way to achieving these objectives. I therefore think this partnership will prove extremely critical for India in very, very key areas. We can discuss these areas later, but just to give your viewers a bit of a preview, if you like, it is going to be renewable energy, water, international solar alliance, agricultural productivity. These are vital areas in which India needs the help of a green superpower like Denmark.
So you've laid it all out for us. Mr. Saxena, how would you look at the ambitious targets that both countries have set? India's 450 gigawatts renewable, Denmark 70% reduction in greenhouse gases by 2030. You know, what specific systems have been put in place, in a sense, to try and meet these targets?
Yeah, the targets are certainly ambitious, but India is going in a very systematic manner in regard to realizing this target. As you already said, that we are already at 100 gigawatt, and we have to be having a capacity, renewable energy capacity of 450 gigawatt by 2030. It's a 4.5-fold increase. But the technical studies which are required to assess the feasibility of integration of such a high degree of renewable to the electricity grid have already been undertaken by various organizations, namely the Central Electricity Authority, which is the apex technical body in the power sector in the country. At TERI also, we have undertaken the studies for integration of high degree of renewables in the power system. And the good news is that the renewable energy of this magnitude can be safely integrated with the Indian electricity grid. The challenge which is there in regard to the flexibility, that is what can be met with a balanced portfolio of supply side flexibility, demand side flexibility, and the energy efficiency.
Ambassador Mohan Kumar, the fact that water is crucial, and we know that there are technologies which are significantly for the efficient use of water, the water management in a sense, smart water management. There's an MOU also for mapping of groundwater resources and aquifers that was signed. How significant is this for a country like ours, as we look at it going forward because of climate change and the other concerns with regard to water?
Oh, I think it's probably going to be the issue in the next 30, 40 years. It's not just climate change, Mark.
Yeah.
India is known to be a water-stressed
country,
along with the West Asian Gulf region or the Middle East. We are I think apart from Africa, of course, but even Africa perhaps is a little better. I would say the West Asian region plus the South Asian region, because of the population pressure, is going to be the most water stressed in the next 30, 40 years. So it is absolutely critical that we take steps now for water conservation, for water efficiency, for reuse of wastewater, the treatment of wastewater, how to use it again. These are areas in which Denmark possesses very critical technology, which we should be taking from them, frankly, which we should be buying from them, which we should be getting from them. And I think since Denmark is a leader in this area, I find it extremely interesting that India and Denmark in 2020, when they established the virtual or the Green Strategic Partnership, are talking in terms of an Indian-Denmark Water Technology Alliance. That is what they in 2020. I'm particularly happy you referred to the MOU. One of the things that we need to know is what are the groundwater resources? What is it that is happening in the different parts of the country? Yes. In some areas, it is falling very perilously, and we need to take action before it's too late. So water is absolutely a critical area going forward.
Mr. Saxena, there are other forms of energy that are emerging, and it's not the traditional renewable energy. We're also looking to try and get energy out of breaking water into hydrogen, oxygen, these kind of things. And the fact is that a lot of these technology and research seems to be with Denmark. They seem to be at the forefront of a lot of green technology, and they're willing under SDG 7 to share all this technology with the world. That itself is something that should be welcome, isn't it? And India should be happy to be cooperating with them.
Certainly, it's a very welcome initiative. The production of hydrogen, the major cost components come from the cost of power used for the electrolysis, and the cost of electrolyzers. As we know, in India, the prices of renewable energy technologies are coming down significantly. So in the days to come, the power which will be used for the electrolysis will be competitive, will make it the hydrogen production to be competitive. Secondly, the electrolyzers, I think the major cost is there. Now, some of the Indian companies have already announced their plans to make the electrolyzers in India. And this is a very, very welcome initiative. And the technology tie-up between the Danish companies and the Indian companies will go a long way in giving the required speed and scale to the technology development in the country.
I like those words, speed and scale, so let's try and analyze them a little bit. Ambassador Mohan Kumar, the size of Denmark, its economy is 350 billion and its population is about 58 lakhs. So, I mean, it is a small country in comparison to India, but for them to access scale and size, they would require a country like India, isn't it? So, and we see here opportunities. Huge opportunities. They have the technology, they have the wherewithal in a sense, and we have the market and the capabilities that can be built.
Oh, absolutely. I think the reason I call Denmark a green superpower is also because they are willing to share technology. They're one of the few countries, I think, which will be able to contribute towards the Paris goal of $100 billion to developing countries from rich countries every year. Denmark will be a leader in this regard. There are not too many countries which are willing to put the money where the mouth is. And Denmark is a rare exception. More than anything else, I find that Denmark is committed to climate action. And that is what is remarkable, because they know the world is interconnected. They think that for a better tomorrow, Denmark has to help out countries like India. Right. They are extremely impressed by the Prime Minister's targets, the Prime Minister's vision. I thought the Danish Prime Minister was quite open in her praise for Prime Minister Modi. The target of 450 gigawatt renewable energy is not something that can be described as trifling. It's a very, very significant goal. Yeah. But I think Denmark can make a difference. I just wanted to point out two companies or two firms from Denmark which can make a huge difference. One is a shipping firm that everybody has heard of, which is called Maersk, and the second is Ørsted, which is a renewable giant. And today in the joint statement, there is talk of significant investments for renewable energy, particularly wind power in both Gujarat and Tamil Nadu. This is, I think, a fantastic step, because we need to actually, India can emerge as a leader in wind power thanks to help from Denmark.
Mr. Saxena, would you like to add to that? Because when we look at the new targets, when India is talking about 450 gigawatts of renewable, we've seen that traditionally wind was the form of energy that was taking the forefront, but now it's solar, and wind is doing the catching up in the mix. So, I mean, how would you look at this kind of cooperation to have an equal mix in a sense? Because also with the changing climate patterns, we're not so sure how how renewable, how much sunlight we can get throughout the year, and the wind power, how to actually harness it best.
I think the one point which we have to keep in mind that we are resource rich in solar power, the sunshine, and it will contribute very significantly to the India's renewable energy program. Insofar as the wind is concerned, I think there is opportunity in offshore wind as well, which is yet to be tapped in India. And the greater hub heights and the offshore wind energy, these two will very well complement than whatever we are doing so far, and giving them the required thrust. I think one can see that the required type of contribution can come from whatever resources we have in the country.
Ambassador Mohan Kumar and Mr. A.K. Saxena for joining us on this important discussion on the Green Strategic Initiative between between India and Denmark. Moving on to our next story, then China seems to have softened its stand on Taiwan. Taiwan is a democracy, and Taiwan's Mainland Affairs Council has called on China to abandon its provocative steps of intrusion, harassment and destruction. But the Chinese President Xi Jinping has vowed to realize what's called a peaceful reunification with Taiwan, saying that unification is the only hope for the Chinese people.
A recent spate of Chinese military fights off southwestern Taiwan has prompted alarm from the island, which Beijing claims as its own and is increasing tensions in a region already on the edge. Chinese President Xi Jinping vowed on Saturday to realize peaceful reunification with Taiwan, though he did not directly mention the use of force after a week of tensions with the Chinese claimed island that sparked international concern.
The complete reunification of our country must be and can be realized. The unification is the hope of all Chinese people. If China can be unified, all Chinese will enjoy a happy life. If China can't unify, everyone will suffer.
Democratically ruled Taiwan has come under increased military and political pressure from Beijing to accept its sovereignty. But Taipei has pledged to defend its freedom and that only Taiwan's people can decide their future. Taiwan said its future lay in the hands of its people. Taiwan's presidential office said that public opinion was very clear in rejecting one country, two systems. In a separate statement, Taiwan's Mainland Affairs Council called on China to abandon its provocative steps of intrusion, harassment and destruction. Speaking at the Yushan Forum in Taipei on Friday, without naming China, President Tsai Ing-wen had expressed hope for peaceful coexistence with neighbors, adding that Taiwan will defend its freedom.
Taiwan is fully committed to collaborating with regional players to prevent armed conflicts in the East China, South China Seas, and in the Taiwan Strait. Taiwan does not seek military confrontation. It hopes for a peaceful, stable, predictable, and mutually beneficial coexistence with its neighbors. But Taiwan will also do whatever it takes to defend its freedom and democratic way of life.
On Saturday, Xi struck a slightly softer note than in July, his last major speech, mentioning Taiwan, in which he vowed to smash any attempts at formal independence. China's Air Force mounted 4 straight days of incursions into Taiwan's Air Defense Identification Zone from 1st October, involving close to 150 aircraft, though those missions have since ended. Xi made no mention of those flights. Newsnight Desk, DD India.
Well, there's already much debate about a new normal post the pandemic. And the new normal manifests itself in nations readjusting to new global realities, one in which the pivot to Asia is becoming more pronounced. And as Asia rises, well, the rise of India is but natural. Here's a report. Geopolitics is in the midst of a hastened paradigm shift brought about by the COVID pandemic. The global standstill from lockdowns over the last 2 years resulted in new alignments taking shape, thwarting imminent threats and strengthening shared interests. The US as a global power and Europe as its key ally have seen a net decline in collective strengths, and Asia has seen a consequent rise.
America is still the largest economy in the world. We still have the most productive workers and the most innovative minds in the world, but we're risk losing our edge as a nation. Our infrastructure used to be the best in the world, literally, not figuratively. Today, according to the World Economic Forum, we rank 13th. Our infrastructure, 12 nations have a better infrastructure than we do, which means they can move product, they can do so many things better than we can do it.
The US under Biden is trying to forge new alignments, strengthening Quad and creating AUKUS. These new alignments have disrupted the traditional US-Europe equation, with Australia having to take accountability for its shift in stance, first with Europe and then with China. The immediate flashpoint of frayed ties is being played out with Chinese belligerence in Taiwan and the Indo-Pacific theater.
The Indo-Pacific region is now the world's fastest growing region. What happens in the region will ultimately shape the course of the 21st century. This emergence offers innumerable opportunities in everything from trade and manufacturing to research and education. But this also brings new tensions and systemic contradictions that could have devastating effects on international security and the global economy if they are not handled carefully.
Australia exports about $4 billion of coal to China every year, which China stopped last year as trade tensions soared between the two countries. Chinese actions have caused a severe shortage in its own country, even as the world's largest emitter is attempting to reduce emission levels.
As its growing belligerence towards Taiwan shows, sensing that its relative power might have peaked with its population ageing, its economy slowing, and its finances creaking, it is quite possible that Beijing could lash out disastrously quite soon.
While the US is engaged with China to reduce tensions in Taiwan, the US is also trying to placate France and Europe. US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken on Wednesday termed his meeting with the French leaders as very positive and very productive. AUKUS resulted in Canberra scuttling a defense contract valued at $40 billion for French submarines. India's strength is that the nation has a younger population and a longer-term rising curve. India's relations with Japan are redefining the balance of power in the region. Indians and overseas Indians are beginning to hold leadership positions in the world's leading multinationals, and India's rise is matched by its ethos.
India offers many more opportunities. We have what is needed to power the global economic recovery. Friends, the rise of India means a rise in trade opportunities with a nation that you can trust, a rise in global integration with increasing openness, a rise in your competitiveness with access to a market which offers scale, and a rise in your returns on investment with availability of skilled human resources.
India's growing influence is being witnessed at close quarters. It's not just a perception change from outside, it's an assertion from within.
I think we all need to appreciate how much our capabilities have changed in these 75 years. That today we are, in nominal terms, the fifth or sixth largest economy, in PPP terms, the third. That our political influence, our capability to contribute in many ways, in terms of the influence which we bring to bear on global debate. So I would say the one big change which I've seen, I've seen it in the course of my career, which is a little more than half of those 75 years.
The 21st century has been described as the Asian century, and as Asians, Indians in particular, begin to play a greater global role in supply chains, multinational corporations, geopolitics, and geobusiness. India's rise is unstoppable, but also much needed. Newsnight Desk, DD India. So that brings us to our second In Focus discussion tonight, and this is it. India and the rise of Asia, and we have with us Dr. Sriram Cholia, Professor and Dean from the Jindal School of International Affairs. Thank you very much, Professor, for being with us, Professor Cholia. So the concern is that there is China's rise, but China, as we see, has caused a lot of, its belligerence has caused a lot of concern, but India's rise has been would probably be looking at in terms of India sharing its ethos. We can see that India is contributing now to global supply chains, multinational corporations, geopolitics, and geobusiness. How do you see this, going forward?
Definitely, Mark. I think compared to China, whose rise has caused a lot of fear and loathing around the world and insecurity, India's rise is going to be much more responsible and towards the planet, towards our neighbors, towards our region in the Indo-Pacific, a non-belligerent and a non-threatening rise. And what we are doing in the process is, like Prime Minister was saying, we create opportunities for others. Our rise is not a a zero-sum game that means a loss for somebody else. Barring a couple of neighbors who resent our power, most of the
Professor Cholia, I'll need to stop you. We're going to take a short break because we're having a little problem with your microphone, but we'll just take a short break and then return, and we'll continue our conversation with Professor Cholia. Stay with us. The changing world of news. Headlines that you wake up to. News that shapes your day. Stories that matter to you. The latest and most accurate updates. A fresh start to a new day. The Breakfast News, Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. on DD India.
Namaste land.
Marhaban ila al-Hind.
Zari India.
Salam India.
Namaste India.
Namaskar Bharata.
Muy
India.
Nahnu hunud.
India.
Ma Hindi hasti.
Hindian.
Salam Hindustan.
We are India.
The changing world of news. Headlines that you wake up to. News that shapes your day. Stories that matter to you. The latest and most accurate updates. A fresh start to a new day. The Breakfast News, Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. on DD India.
Well over a year since the COVID-19 outbreak, the world is still looking for answers. How did the COVID-19 virus originate?
Welcome back. Sorry about that. We have with us Professor Cholia once again, and I hope that his microphone is working. Professor Cholia, you were talking about the comparison between the rise of China, which has now become belligerent, and the rise of India.
Yeah, so the Indian story is one of multilateralism, taking everybody along and to spread the benefits of our growth. So like Prime Minister was mentioning, our rise is an opportunity for many countries because of our 3 Ds, as he often talks about: democracy, demography and demand. So I think in the post-COVID order, what we are trying to do is supply chains we want to make them more resilient, less dependent on China, less centric on China, because then you can be held to blackmail like we saw last year during the peak of the pandemic. So the world is concerned about it. There is a China +1 strategy. Many countries want to diversify their investments away from China, and I think we are making a concerted push that this is a big window of opportunity to attract some of that investment into our country for our domestic economic growth, but also, like I said, to make smaller countries in the region feel more assured that there is some balance of power. Because if India gets stronger, it means that there are alternatives to China. I think that's the big lesson that we are seeing from this post-pandemic transition, where India really is being looked upon by Western countries and also by countries in the Asia Pacific and in the Indo-Pacific and beyond as an opportunity.
But if we look at the West, we see that the US and Europe are to some extent declining in their importance, and there is a rise in Asia. And the importance of India is that India is a young country and its growth path is long term, because we are seeing that China is already facing issues with age. So we have a certain aspect which we probably have not capitalized too much on in terms of our demography.
Yeah, like this former Australian Prime Minister was saying, probably China is already peaking. You know,
Yes.
it cannot go any further. It's already extracted all its human and natural resources, and that's why they have excess capacity now. That's why they do Belt and Road and all these heavy global, you know, going out strategy. So India, on the other hand, our resources are not yet tapped to the highest level. So I think our peak is going to come, you know, in another 15-20 years. So our best time is ahead. But we need to plan between now and then. That's why Prime Ministers emphasize a lot of important diplomatic, you know, coalitions, Quad, and other forms of, you know, counterbalancing maneuvers that we are doing to maintain the balance, and also to for the world to know that India is ready to now take a lead. Because earlier the notion was Asia's rise meant only East Asia, China, Japan, South Korea. And maybe ASEAN countries to a lesser extent, Asian tigers. Now India is like the last to leap forward after all these countries did, but better late than never. What has happened last 7 years, the record inflows of FDI, the confidence the world is showing about doing business in India, the military interoperability and other you know, partnerships we are doing with like-minded countries, all these show that India is now ready to step up to the plate and take up that mantle. Earlier there was the political will was lacking to have that kind of assertive and proactive diplomacy. Now thankfully we have it.
And we're looking at the Indo-Pacific theater, which is playing out as you know, the most important theater. It's an area of great influence and growing influence. And what do you see? I mean, India is vital to this area geographically, but based on India's response as a first responder to COVID, one can see, and now post-COVID, India, you know, in a sense, first off the blocks, because we're going to be, you know, vaccinating such a large population at such a rapid pace. So this is all showing that, you know, I mean, India has some first mover advantages.
Yeah, and our vaccine capacity is not only for our domestic needs. We are going to resume helping the rest of the world, especially our Indo-Pacific neighbors, and the world is appreciating the fact. Vaccine Maitri was a success, and the phase 2 of it is also going to be a big success. The world is looking up to us as a provider of solutions. We always say we are a net provider of security and of prosperity and well-being in the whole region. Prime Minister's vision of Sagar is, you know, security and growth for all in the region, and that is Indo-Pacific. I think Indo-Pacific needs India, our Navy, our Air Force, our military power projection, but also our softer forms of you know, capacities need to be spread out in the region, so people benefit from it. I mean, India is, like we said, is a market, but also capable of helping with services growth in the region, and with also shoring up weaker countries that are facing threats to their sovereignty through debt trap and other mechanisms. I mean, now we are part of the Quad infrastructure initiative. The whole region, Indo-Pacific, needs trillions of dollars of infrastructure. We may not have the finances, but we have got the human resources and the capacity to join hands with other partners and build it in this region so that it becomes resilient. So that's what trust. India is a trustworthy rising power, is not a feared you know, a superpower or a great power. So as a middle power that is rising, there is a window of opportunity where we are seen not with suspicion or with fear, but welcomed. So I think this is the opportunity where we can peak in the next 15 years, become a great power by utilizing this red carpet that the world is laying out for us.
We leave it there. Thank you very much, Dr. Sriram Cholia, for being with us and enlightening us on this interesting subject. Moving on then to our next story. The 13th round of Corps Commander level talks between India and China to find a resolution to the 17-month-long standoff in eastern Ladakh will be held on the Chinese side of the Chushul-Moldo border personnel meeting point on Sunday. Lieutenant General P.G.K. Menon, the commander of the 15th Corps, will lead the Indian delegation, which will also include a diplomatic representative. For China, the delegation will be led by Major General Liu Lin, the commander of the South Xinjiang military district. Just a day ahead of the talks, the Army General, the Chief of the Army Staff, General M.M. Naravane, on Saturday said that China is building infrastructure on its side in the region. And he said that if the Chinese are there to stay, we are here to stay as well. Now, Iraq will see a parliamentary election on Sunday. There are 329 seats up for grabs in this election, and more than 25 million citizens are eligible to vote, but not nationals living abroad. So 3,240 candidates are running for the selection, which include 950 women. And Prime Minister Mustafa al-Kadhimi, who took office in May of last year, rescheduled the polls, which were supposed to be held in 2022 because of the unprecedented youth-led protest movements that took place 2 years ago. Here's our story.
Iraq is all set to hold its 5th parliamentary elections on Sunday, a year early in the face of an anti-government protest movement. The nation has been mired in corruption and economic crisis after almost 2 decades of conflict and insurgency. Security is in place and early voting is already taking place in several parts, including Iraq's semi-autonomous Kurdistan region. A total of 329 seats are up for grabs in the election. Iraq's High Independent Electoral Commission has set up around 8,954 polling centers and 55,041 polling stations for general voting. More than 25 million citizens are eligible to vote, but not the nationals living abroad. Over 3,240 candidates are in the running, including 950 women. 1/4 of seats are reserved for female candidates and 9 for minorities, including Christians and Yazidis. Prime Minister Mustafa al-Kadhimi, who only took office in May 2020, moved forward the scheduled 2022 polls as a concession to the unprecedented youth-led protest movement that erupted 2 years ago. Speaking to the public in a televised speech on Friday, Kadhimi, who isn't contesting, said that he is not supporting anyone.
I want to emphasize that I and my cabinet refrained from competing in the elections. I have avoided leaning towards a specific side, candidate, party, or political entity.
Well, let's take a look now at what else is making news across the world.
Russia reported 968 coronavirus-related deaths on Saturday, its highest single-day death toll since the start of the pandemic. In the last 24 hours, there were 29,362 new cases recorded in the country. Lebanon has no centrally generated electricity after the country's biggest 2 power stations shut down due to a fuel shortage. According to a government official, the Lebanese power network completely stopped working since Saturday noon, and it is unlikely that it will work until next Monday or for several days. Buildings near the volcano on the Spanish island of La Palma were engulfed by rivers of lava. The Cumbre Vieja volcano began erupting on September 19 and has destroyed more than 800 buildings and forced the evacuation of about 6,000 people from their homes on the island. Iranian foreign minister said that Iran will return to the Vienna talks on reviving the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, but will not waste its time in negotiations. He added that for the new government of Iran, it is important that the interests and rights of Iranian people be fully secured in the negotiations. It is important to receive signals from the other side, including the United States, that the Americans have a strong intention to fully return to their commitments.
Bangladesh and the United Nations signed an MOU on Saturday for the relocation of Rohingya refugees to the newly developed facility at the Bhashan Char Island. The MOU sets out the policy framework of the services and common protection for the Rohingya humanitarian response on the island. The MOU recognizes the generosity of the government of Bangladesh for hosting almost 9 lakh Rohingya refugees in the country. It allows for close cooperation between Bangladesh and the UN to provide services and activities for benefit of increasing number of Rohingya refugees living on the island. The UN said that the support should continue until refugees are able to return to Myanmar in a safe, voluntary, dignified and sustainable manner, which remains the shared priority of the UN and the government of Bangladesh. The Minister of State for Animal Husbandry and Fisheries, as well as for Information Broadcasting, Dr. L. Murugan, inaugurated the Recirculatory Aquaculture System (RAS) facility at Awantipur in Jammu and Kashmir, developed by young entrepreneur Ms. Hina Pare under the Pradhan Mantri Matsya Sampada Yojana. On the occasion, he termed this as an inspiration to the youth of Jammu and Kashmir on the path of development and said it proves to be a great tool for women's empowerment, along with making the youth self-reliant.
A unique project where we are visiting this is our Nariel Sakti, who are entertaining women entrepreneurs also, our first entrepreneur in this valley. She set up this unit. She is in graduate. She is studying in BBA. So while she is studying, she become an entrepreneur, and she is developing this unique project here under the Prime Minister Matwa Samada Yojana.
Civil Aviation Minister Jyotiraditya Scindia virtually inaugurated the greenfield Sindhudurg Airport in Maharashtra and flagged off the first flight from Sindhudurg to Mumbai under the Udan Scheme. The minister in his address said that the inauguration of the airport and the start of the flight to Mumbai marks a new chapter in the glorious history of the Konkan region. This development will open new avenues of growth of local trade and tourism. The inauguration marked the commencement of the 61st airport under Udan Scheme and successful operationalization of 381 routes under Udan. Prime Minister also tweeted, and he said, "Today is a special day for the wonderful people of Konkan region and will surely give an impetus to connectivity and tourism." Well, Tata Sons had won the bid for Air India, and life has come a full circle for the national carrier. But Air India, which was created by the Tatas in 1932, will be going back to them after a gap of almost 70 years. Let's listen to excerpts of an interview with J.R.D. Tata given to All India Radio back in the 80s.
After more than 2 decades and 3 attempts, the government was able to find a buyer for the national carrier. However, it was nothing less than deja vu for the Maharaja, which returned to the fold of Tatas after it was nationalized in the year 1953. An emotional Ratan Tata, the chairman emeritus of Tata Sons, welcomed back the airlines into the group. He tweeted, "On an emotional note, Air India, under the leadership of Mr. J.R.D. Tata, had at one time gained the reputation of being one of the most prestigious airlines in the world. Tatas will have the opportunity of regaining the image and reputation it enjoyed in earlier years. Mr. J.R.D. Tata would have been overjoyed if he was in our midst today." The history of commercial aviation in India begins with J.R.D. Tata, who also holds the distinction of becoming the first qualified pilot from India in 1929.
I had made up my own mind, that I wanted Air India, which I thought was suitable, with a hyphen in between, because I didn't want to sound as if somebody was giving the air to India. So I had decided to be very democratic, and to all employees we sent a questionnaire. And I gave, in order to be sure that Air India would be included, I gave a few suggestions. Indian Airlines, Air India, and a few others. But fortunately, there was almost unanimity in favor of Air India.
The quintessential picture of the Maharaja, which we see on every Air India flight, was created by Bobby Kuka and Jal Kawasji. J.R.D. himself retold the story in an interview to All India Radio.
The original logo was and still is, the centaur. But that is, it was very poorly designed. We got it redone, and now that's the standard logo. Yeah. But the Maharaja was something else. It was a publicity, a gimmick that was popular all over the world. And I had something to do only from time to time to insist that they don't spoil him. The Maharaja is supposed to be not a very respectable gentleman. He must never look at you. He's always looking down very modestly. He's a bogus Maharaja.
On October 15, 1932, Tata Airlines operated its first flight ferrying mail from Karachi to Mumbai. Over the next few decades, Tata always held sway over the national carrier, even after its nationalization, until he was thrown out of the board of the company in 1978. Many years later, in an interview with AIR, J.R.D. sounded disappointed with the global ranking and reputation of the once admired airline going down.
There are good airlines, there are poor airlines, there are very poor airlines. I think Air India remains amongst perhaps the 10 or 15 better ones. But others have moved ahead faster.
How do you explain that?
Well, the Air India has become now a government-run airline. They don't have the competitive sense.
For JRD Tata, it wasn't just about running an airline, but more about creating a brand with a unique ethos. Under JRD, the airline acquired art to adorn its offices, and the staff were trained to be courteous and professional in their duties. The Maharaja may have come a full circle, returning to the Tata fold. The challenge now is to revive what was once a national carrier to match global standards, putting ease of flying at the heart of the entire effort. Abhishek Jha's report, DD India. Defence Minister Rajnath Singh today presented Gallantry and Meritorious Service medals to the Indian Coast Guard personnel at the investiture ceremony at the National Stadium complex in the national capital. Addressing the gathering, the Defence Minister said that the Indian Coast Guard started with 4 to 6 boats and now has over 150 ships and 66 aircraft and holds an important place in the world's best maritime forces. Rajnath Singh also said it is not possible to ensure comprehensive internal and external security framework without strengthening maritime security.
मैरीटाइम सिक्योरिटी को इंश्योर किए बिना एक कम्प्रिहेंसिव इंटरनल और एक्सटर्नल सिक्योरिटी फ्रेमवर्क बनाना किसी भी सूरत में संभव नहीं है। इंडिया के मैरीटाइम जोन्स को सेफ, सिक्योर और पॉल्यूशन फ्री रखना हमारी सुरक्षा जरूरतों, इन्वायरमेंटल हेल्थ और इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट को एक साथ इंश्योर करता है। मुझे ये कहते हुए बेहद खुशी हो रही है कि हमारा इंडियन कोस्ट गार्ड इन सभी चैलेंजेस को एक साथ सक्सेसफुली एड्रेस कर रहा है।
The Union INB and Youth Affairs and Sports Minister Anurag Thakur showcased his skipping skills during a function in New Delhi on Saturday. Sharing a video on Twitter, he said, "When they challenge you, you've got a choice. Skip it or perform like a champion." Well, in women's cricket, Australia have survived a spirited Indian fight back to win the second T20 by 4 wickets, securing an unassailable 9-5 lead in the multi-format series. The tense finish had appeared unlikely after Australia had reduced India to 9 for 81 during its innings before late hitting by Pooja Vastrarkar lifted the tourists' score to 9 for 118 in Carrara on the Gold Coast. Australia slumped to 4 for 46 midway through the run chase, but Tahilya McGrath, who made her T20 debut on Thursday, in Thursday's washed-out match, she scored an unbeaten 42 to see the home side reach the victory target of 119 with 5 balls to spare. And on that note, we conclude this bulletin. Thank you very much for being with us. Namaskar.